The average person who felt that he could have held on to his coattail and ride the wave into the kingdom, because in those days, they felt that the kingdom that he came to start was an earthly kingdom. And because he was riding a crest of popularity, people followed him believing that he was going to do what they wanted him to do in the earth. And he died. And when he died, people's hopes died because they felt their destinies died. But thank God for God that Christ died, but he rose again. But this morning I don't want to talk too much about his resurrection, because in the scheme of things, he hasn't died yet. Today is the day that he rode into Jerusalem on a jackass back. And so, humor me a bit. Let us take a walk back in time into the days of Christ around this same time, 1,900 and some years ago, because he died at 33. So it wasn't 25 years ago. He was born 25 years ago, but he died 1992 or something years ago. And today we celebrate that. But I want to celebrate it in a unique way. I want to look at the circumstances around his death from a personal point of view. And so, humor me a bit as I said, I am going back into Jerusalem, and I'm going back as a news reporter. I even have an Israeli name. And I'm going to do 7 reports as to circumstances around the death of Jesus. And I will also bring biblical context into it. Understand that at the time of Jesus, or before Jesus was born, all the Jews had was the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. Penta meaning 5. But as they developed as a nation, other books came along. So the Psalms came along. Then the prophets came along as well. But that was only the Old Testament. Jesus did not factor in the New Testament as such. He wasn't alive when the New Testament was created. The New Testament, however, is about him, but he wasn't a New Testament living person. So, let me bring the news as I got it then. Breaking news: the Messiah's triumph and betrayal, a week that shook Jerusalem, by Johanan Ben Levi, the Jerusalem Chronicle. Title: A City of Dust and Prophecy. Dateline: Jerusalem, the 10th of Nisan. Nisan is one of the months in the Jewish calendar. And when you go through the Bible, you're going to see the different months, Abib and whatnot and whatnot. Nisan was that month. The sun beats down the dry, winding roads of Judea, coating the sandal feet of pilgrims in a fine layer of dust as they stream into Jerusalem for Passover. The air is thick with anticipation, not just for the festival, but for the rumored arrival of the Nazarene prophet, Yeshua, also called Jesus, whom many whisper is the long-awaited Messiah. The Romans watch with wary eyes, their armored patrols tightening their grip on the city. Yet the people, oppressed by heavy taxes and pagan rule, dare to hope. Could this be the one to free us? Report number 2. Hosanna, the crowd's joyful revolution. Dateline: Jerusalem, outside the eastern gate. Here's an eyewitness account. Yesterday, a throng of ecstatic followers carpeted the road with palm branches and their own clothes as Yeshua rode in on a donkey's colt, a deliberate echo of the prophet Zechariah's word. And Zechariah 9:9 says, "Behold, your king comes to you, humble and mounted on a donkey." The crowd roared, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of of the Lord, as is quoted in Psalm 118 and verse 26. Many believe he will soon declare a bloodless coup, overthrowing Rome with divine power. But when I pressed one of his disciples, Simon the Zealot, he admitted, the Master speaks of a kingdom, but not like any we imagine. Third report, the Last Supper, a betrayal foretold. Decline, Upper Room, Jerusalem. Exclusively from Judas Iscariot. Remember, Judas was the traitor. So a reporter could not get in to the upper room. But for him to have information, somebody had to give it. Judas gave me. At a secret Passover meal, Yeshua stilled his inner circle by washing their feet like a servant. Then said, one of you will betray me. That's in John 13:21. When pressed, he handed bread to Judas, a chilling signal. Later, Judas confided with shaking hands. He told me, what you must do quickly. How did he know? Even more shocking, Yeshua broke bread and called it his body, then shed wine as his blood, saying, this is the new covenant. And that is quoted in Luke 22:20. When he predicted Peter's denial, the big fisherman swore he'd die first. Agony under the olive trees. This is Decline, Garden of Gethsemane. It's midnight. Raw humanity revealed. I followed Yeshua's inner circle to the garden, where he collapsed in anguish. My soul is crushed with sorrow to the point of death. 3 times he begged the Father to spare him, sweating like drops of blood. His disciples, however, slept through his crisis. A temple guard speaking anonymously admitted, I have seen rebels face deathly fanatic, but never a man so heartbroken, yet resolved. Arrest in the garden. The kiss of treachery. Decline Gethsemane just before dawn. Judas's final act. Under torchlight, the betrayer approached Yeshua with a kiss, the prearranged signal. When soldiers seized him, Peter drew a sword, slicing off a guard's head, but Yeshua healed the man and surrendered without resistance. Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? And this is referred to in John 18:11. Judas, pale and trembling, fled into the night. A temple slave whispered, I've never seen a man look so hollow. The crowds, report 5, the crowd's shocking reversal. Decline Pilate's Praetorium, and this is at dawn. The Praetorium is where Pilate, the ruler, lived. From Hosanna to crucify him. The same masses who hailed Yeshua days ago now screamed for Barabbas, a murderer, to be freed instead. Caiaphas's allies riled and shouting, we have no king but Caesar. Even Pilate seemed unnerved, washing his hands off the verdict, but the mob howled, his blood be on us and our children. A Pharisee descendant, Nicodemus, muttered to me, this is madness. The law demands evidence, not hysteria. Report number 7, Peter's denial, a broken promise. Decline, courtyard of the high priest. From boast to breakdown. I trailed Peter as he lurked near the trial. When a servant girl recognized him, he snapped, I don't know the man. And after the third denial, a rooster crowed, just as Yeshua had predicted. Peter's face crumbled. He staggered away, weeping bitterly. A bystander scoffed. So much for loyalty. The epilogue is, what now? As Yeshua is led to Golgotha under Roman guard, Jerusalem is divided. Some weep, others jeer. His disciples have vanished. Only the women, including his mother, follow at a distance. Is this the end? Or as the Nazarene once cryptically said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. and this is referred to in John 2:1-19. Stay with the Jerusalem Chronicle for updates. Johanan Ben Levi is a senior correspondent, that's me, covering religious and political movements in Judea. His sources include temple officials, Roman insiders, and Yeshua's followers. Having done this report, having filed these 7 reports over the past few days, I wanted to take a little deeper look at Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the high priest. In Israeli society, the high priest was supposed to be a man who understood what God wanted, who spoke to God, who had a relationship with God, and that relationship would reflect back to the community, the Israelite community. His name was Joseph Caiaphas. His title was High Priest of Israel. His role, he presided over the Sanhedrin, that's the Israelite council, the Jewish council, Judaism's supreme religious court. His political alignment, he was a shrewd collaborator with Rome, appointed by the prefect Valerius Gratus. Can you imagine the Archbishop of Trinidad and the Prime Minister of Trinidad are such good friends that one has influence over the other? So the Prime Minister has influence over the religious rights of the church, and the person who is responsible for the church has the Prime Minister's ear, and what the Prime Minister wants he does. That's the kind of tied up relationship that you have between the high priest, Caiaphas, and the rulers who are Romans. And that kind of tie-in between both of them created a good relationship for them, but it was a poor relationship for the Jews, because the Jews hated the Romans. They were having them under bondage. And if the person who was supposed to stand for us is standing with our oppressors, then you know all hopes are lost. And that was what the status was with Rome, was with Israel at the time. As it is described here, Caiaphas was a shrewd collaborator, shrewd meaning smart. But he was smart to his own advantage, not to the glory of the Israelites, and definitely not to the glory of God. Key facts about Caiaphas. He is a political survivor. He served as high priest for 18 years, unusually long, and the reason why he served that long is because he was of good service to the Romans, so they didn't push him out. They were glad that he was there because he was seeking their interest. He balanced Jewish religious authority with loyalty to Rome to maintain order. Because the Romans, as much as they had control, they knew that if they pushed too much, the Israelites would rebel. And they didn't want a rebellion, because the person who was in charge of Israel at that point in time was responsible to the Roman Emperor Caesar. And he wanted to make sure that Caesar didn't have a problem. So as far as he was concerned, if I could keep the Jews quiet in my corner, then Caesar doesn't have to make an intervention. I will keep my post. And Caiaphas was helping him keep his position. What was his role in Jesus' trial? It was an illegal night trial. Jewish law forbade trials at night, but Caiaphas rushed to convict Jesus before Passover. What were the charges? He accused Jesus of blasphemy, claiming to be the Messiah and the Son of God, and sedition, threatening Roman rule. Nothing of the sort. But when you want to charge somebody, you will make some charges. And that's what Caiaphas did. And you know, he made a statement that is a telling statement. He said, it is better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish. And that statement was prophetic, because it turned out to be that the death of Christ saved the nation, but not only Israel. We are saved because of Christ's death. But sometimes people say stuff that they don't even know how true it is. Caiaphas was speaking the truth. The unholy alliance with Pilate. Caiaphas pressured Pontius Pilate to approve the crucifixion. More than once Pilate come out after he flogged Jesus. He said, I ain't find no fault with this man. And more than once he said that. But he was so weak that he couldn't assert the authority that he had. He could have told the Jewish people, yeah, what's going on? I ain't find no fault with this man. I'm not punishing him. But what he did is he take an easy way out. He ain't find no fault. He said, have your way, do what they want to do. And they decided they wanted to crucify him. So that's eventually what happened. Historians suggest Pilate, though wary, that means cautious, complied to avoid rebellion reports reaching Rome. In other words, if my boss say I have a rebellion down in my end of the woods, he gonna feel like me, he might move me, I gotta lose my cushy job, the nice residence I have. He didn't want that. So as far as he was concerned, Christ was collateral damage. In other words, I don't mind sacrificing one man if I had to save me and my position. That's the thinking that Caiaphas and the other Jews had. But you know what? That thinking helped Christ, and that thinking in hindsight helped us. There's archaeological proof. That means people dig and they find out that in 1990, a burial bone box was found inscribed, Joseph, son of Caiaphas. Likely that was Caiaphas' grandson. Why did Caiaphas want Jesus dead? Number one, he feared Rome. Rome was the seat of the Roman Empire. Caesar was the emperor of all the Roman Empire. And Caesar was Caiaphas, well not Caiaphas, but Pilate's boss. If Pilate's boss had a problem with Pilate, then the relationship between Pilate and Caiaphas would have been damaged. Because if he sent somebody else, he knows how to worm his way back in. That happens when you're doing the wrong thing. It's like what you call brown nosing. If my boss changed, and I used to bring booty and meat and whatnot and go home by the boss and wash the car, when that boss changed, I'm not sure I could do the same thing with the next boss, you know. And that was Caiaphas' fear. Jesus' popularity risked destabilizing Judea. A messianic revolt, in other words, that was promised, would bring Roman legions. That's the Roman army. Two, the threat to temple power. If this happened, then Caiaphas would lose, as I say, his hold on control. At the end, Caiaphas was deposed in 36 AD. 3 years after Christ died, he was moved. He didn't retire, he didn't die, he didn't fall sick. They deposed him. And he faded into obscurity, while the movement he tried to crush spread globally. Imagine how the angels in heaven still laughing, because Satan, through his emissaries, Pilate and Caesar and Caiaphas, tried to kill a man. They killed him, but they didn't kill the movement. Christianity started then. It has never stopped. It continues to grow. It is the biggest movement pulling people together, and not only for this physical space, but for a space that the average person cannot even understand. And that's why Peter could mention that the Master spoke of a kingdom, but it is not something that the average person will understand. It's not of this world. Caiaphas sought to eliminate a troublemaker, but his actions fulfilled prophecy in Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 and launched Christianity. And so let me read a bit of Psalm 22 to show you how prophetic the Psalms were. The Psalms were written before Jesus came. Isaiah 22, Isaiah, the book of Isaiah and the prophets were written before Christ came. And you will see the clear distinction, you will see the clear referral to Christ as if they had seen him. And that's why this morning it was critical that when I asked how you doing, that you speak as you want it to be and not as you are. Because when the Psalms were written, they spoke as to what it will be. They were prophetic. And so as children of God, while we may not be called prophets, we have to be prophetic in terms of our utterances. When we talk about favor over our family, we must say that and see that even though things ain't going right. So Psalm 22, verse 1 and verse 6 to 8. and verse 14 to 18 and verse 30 to 31. I'm not going to read the whole psalm, so I'll take out portions that you will recognize. Verse 1 says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. Those were the same words that Christ spoke on the cross. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And he says in verse 6, but I'm a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. Wasn't that what happened to him after Palm Sunday? All who seek me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord this day. Let the Lord rescue him. Wasn't that what one of the bandits on the cross with him said? Let him deliver him since he delights in him. In verse 14, the psalmist said, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. When he was thirsty and he knew he was thirsty, what they did? They dip a reed with a sponge on the end in vinegar. You thirsty, and that's what they're giving you. Vinegar to drink. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. That is what happened on the cross. This statement here in Psalm 22 is said even before this happened. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. And verse 31 ends, they will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to our people yet unborn, he has done it. Isn't that what we do today? Children who are now being born, they're going to be born into a world that is chaotic. But if we are around them as children of God, we could speak into their lives and say, as bad as it is, there is hope. And in Isaiah 53, verses 2 to 5 and verse 7, here is what it says. He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Verse 3 says, he was despised and rejected by mankind. Isn't that what took place? A man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Verse 4 says, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Those are familiar words taken from Isaiah 53. Those words are still true. In fact, when we want to declare, even though there's evidence that we're sick, we want to declare that what we don't see is what we want to see. We claim that by Christ's stripes, we are healed. And we ain't healed yet. But that's the faith that God expects us to operate in. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. For further reporting, I will file additional reports. But for this time, and for now, this is Johanan Ben Levi signing out. Over and out. At this time, we will go into the Lord's Supper. Somebody come. All through the year we celebrate the Lord's Supper, but I guess there's greater significance to it at this time because the reality of Christ's death is in our face. We celebrate his death at this time of year. And so the Last Supper ought to have an even deeper meaning now than it had before. It doesn't mean that we doesn't take it seriously. But if even we weren't taking the Lord's Supper seriously before, today, this close to what we celebrate as his death, is a time when we need to consider why he died. And if we are not in Christ, or if we halfway in and halfway out, it means we trivializing the effort that he made on the cross for our salvation. Because when he came, he didn't come to have abundant life here on earth. He didn't come here to enjoy life for a while and go back. He came knowing that he had a mission. His mission was to die. My mission and my purpose, I didn't come here with the intention to die. All of us came here and we want to live, well, of course, until we die. But we have no hope of, we wish we didn't have to die. Christ, when he came, he knew he came to die. So he literally, willingly gave his life up. Some people want to believe that he killed, they killed him. Well, he could want them to believe that. But the reality is that one way or the other, he came to die. The problem with that though is, those who were the engineers, those who participated in killing him, I think they have a special price to pay. So, in 1 Corinthians, let me see if I can remember where this is. I have the thing mapped out and then verse 23 onward says, "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you." This is Paul speaking to the Corinthians, the first book of Corinthians. There were two. "The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.' And it continues, 'Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord. A man ought to examine himself before he eats of the bread and drinks of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without recognizing the body of the Lord eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many among you are weak and sick, and a number of you have fallen asleep.'" And it tells you of the significance and the seriousness of the Lord's Supper. While these are emblems or symbols, they represent something. They represent us understanding that Christ died. And if we trivialize this, what we're doing is trivializing Christ's death. And so there are people who come up and they take the body and blood of Christ. The Catholics actually believe that when you receive this, the bread changes into the body, and the blood changes in the wine changes into the blood. That principle that they hold to is something called transubstantiation. Trans means move across. Substantiation means it changes its substance. That is not so. We do not hold to that principle. What we're saying though is this is a symbol of what you believe. And if you treat what you believe, or you treat this symbol of what you believe in an unseemly manner, then you really believe. So this is not about adoring the bread and adoring the wine. This is about remembering what was done. And so when you come up, your heart remembers, your heart feels the sadness of his death. But even as you do that, because we have knowledge now that he rose again. So although you have sadness on one hand, you also celebrate with a joy knowing that Christ rose again. This is what this is about.